want to hear about, you talked about plant medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you walk us through some of those experiences and things that you've learned from kind of what you did? And then, what are some of the experiences and things that you've learned? Because most every conversation that I have now, especially, obviously both you and I did not serve, but we know a lot of people in the special operations community. People have gone through very traumatic experiences, whether it's, special operations or not. But it seems like most conversations that I have now, people are going through, are utilizing psychedelics to work through trauma, work through grief, to help with their depression, their anxiety. What were your experiences like?
They've been amazing. I mean, I've not had a lot of hard times, but I've had some damn good lessons, particularly with ayahuasca. I've sat with ayahuasca now 9 times. I've also sat with and facilitated some of psilocybin and MDMA, which are beautiful medicines and have done profound things. But for me, the most profound has been ayahuasca by far, because it's something that you cannot control. You can set an intention with psilocybin, with MDMA, and that's kind of what you'll go through pretty much with ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is called the grandmother. Like, she's going to show you what you need to see. And I've witnessed people heal decades of trauma in a 48-hour period. I've seen it happen. And for me, it's been cases where I haven't had like these insane visuals of all this stuff, but it's just been more sensations and listening of like, you need to chill out. You need to be still. Like, one of the times I was like, I would love to see my dad, because people have visuals in that journey, and you go on you go on a journey. And I was like, I really would love to see this man and just maybe get a spiritual hug from him or something. Like, I really want that. And this was 2 years ago. And in that process, it was more of, I didn't physically hear it, but I heard, and I started to visualize different men that are in my life now. DV, my man Freddie, a guy named John Wayne, some other people, and just these different guys that I've been able to lean on and be with and show me different things. And it was funny because all the traits that I would want to see in my dad, each one of these men possessed that trait. And then after I saw the flashes of all these guys, she was like, see, he's been here the whole time. I was like, oh, damn. Okay, thank you. And the lesson was, why are you yearning for this being that's no longer here? Like, his spirit's gone, but he's in these different people that I've given to you.
Right.
That God has presented to you. That's the thing. Like, people hear this, like plant medicine, psychedelics, and you've talked about this with other guys. And after my first experience, I was sharing this profound experience of a girl who, again, healed this decades of trauma in the second night. And then my personal experience. And he was like, yeah, but what if you believe in God? And I looked at him and said, who do you think put it here? Like, why do you think it's here for us? So what I want people and caution people to do is if you haven't done psychedelics or you're kind of questioning it, man, look at the healing that it's helping people. It's getting people off of dependence on opioids and other drugs and spousal abuse and molestations and rapes and all these different things, something they've been dealing with for decades, all their lives.
Right.
And so with plant medicine, man, with me, it's just been this profound journey each time I do it. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but every time it's something. Like, I lost one of my sisters a couple of years ago, and I thought I'd grieve that. And then she showed me my sister and this story that I hadn't even thought about. And I got to go through that grieving process again. And my fiance was next to me, and I was just, for I don't know how long, maybe 20, 30 minutes, just in a ball, sobbing uncontrollably, like rocking back and forth. And she was putting her hands on me. One of my friends had hands on me. And then finally I was like, okay. And this is where the suffering side of it, like, man, I could have easily stayed there the rest of the night and just suffered through that stuff.
Right.
Then I was like, because I'm like, all right, man, you do this, you teach this, you've done it. You've apologized. You've said your piece. You've seen her. You've done this thing. Come out of it now. And I was able to heal and solidify that losing of my sister, and go through that process with her, with friends in the room. And from that, she looked at me the next day. She was like, I'm so proud of you. So because of what you did, I've never seen that side of you. Thank you for showing me that. And it's been incredible to experience what plant medicine will show you. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's challenging. I'm not saying bad, I'm saying challenging.
Right.
Because it can be, and it is, and it should be, because that's how we grow. You know, we come to the gym and we beat the hell out of ourselves, and we're like, yeah, I'm gonna go work out and it's gonna suck. Why won't you do something that's emotionally and spiritually like that? That's what plant medicine does for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I did ketamine. That's my only real experience with psychedelics. Again, because we talk about this a lot on the podcast, we're not telling anyone to go do ayahuasca. We're not telling anyone to go do psilocybin, but, you know, do your research. You know, make sure that you are in an environment that's comfortable with, in my opinion, professionals. Don't just go buy mushrooms and take them. Like we're not telling you to go do psychedelics. Like, just want that on record. Another, you know, I think that they're coming, right? It's going to be a revolution for mental health. I mean, just looking at how it's helping people and the science behind it, but and the data. You know, you mentioned the part about, because I get the question too, and I still wrestle with it, like, you know, psychedelics and my faith, and you know, some people are on one side of the spectrum or the other. I will say that I definitely understand the other side of the argument, where it's like your conscious is changing, right? And that scares people, especially with faith. Totally understand that. Totally understand the validity behind that argument. I will say personally, in speaking to people, other people's experiences have actually, they didn't believe in God. They were not Christian before taking, you know, specifically Ibogaine. That I've heard this multiple times, and they witnessed what, I mean, it sounds terrifying, but like witness what hell would look like, and also what heaven would look like. And so that experience allowed them to believe in God and to take their faith seriously. So I will say there is, if it was against, if it is against it, well, it's bringing people to the religion. So I think that's kind of, you know, an interesting other side of the coin. But for myself, one of the things that with each of my ketamine treatments is I felt a connectedness to God and a strengthening in my faith. I realized how small I was and how big and powerful and righteous Christ is. That was one of the things that I experienced. So just, you know, that's just my 2 cents in my experiences. But I mean, I totally understand the other side of the argument. But you know, I think it is interesting, and I think that if people are suffering and they need help, I don't think you should shy away from these medications because these medicines, because they are, they have worked in our circumstances.
Absolutely.
We'll get into my experience, but first I really want to hear about yours, because I remember I called you when I was going through my dark spot and my dark place, and you were going through yours as well. So why don't you kind of walk me through what was going on with your anxiety? I guess we'll start there. Kind of that dark spot that you were in just a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, it all happened. I think it's been building up for a while, and I just didn't realize it. Like, it was just culmination of grief, and then I had, you know, COVID, shingles, and then in January, I just started having these unbelievable.
And you also run you have a very stressful business.
Yeah, you could say that, man. I'm all over the place, and you know, and then, you know, my son, and they're saying all my childhood and all this, you know, then all the military stuff, but you know, there's just, you know, a lot of stress that accumulates, and you just deal with it. And my way to deal with it was just to keep my business going, drinking, and just not drinking excessively, but drinking socially,
right,
and have as much fun as I can, and still every day crying, honoring my son. Well, I mean, in January, I just didn't feel right, and I went to the hospital, and I said, look, I did not feel good. I was diagnosed with AFib, which I'll blame on my damn stepson, because we drank like Vikings over Christmas, and he put me into what's called holiday heart.
Sparky, yeah,
we were we had a lot of fun, and then they said, oh, my blood pressure's through the roof, and I'm like, well, I just don't feel. I was all itchy, and
yeah, dude, like your skin was crawling,
right. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I'm like, dude, this don't feel right. Then I started getting worried that it was something physiological. And so they said, so they kept me overnight. My blood, but as soon as I was in the hospital, and I had no business, no phone, and I had a book. Man, my blood pressure was like probably yours, like 120/70 or something like that, right? So like, all right, you're okay. So they gave me some pills. I left. About a week later, man, I was just, I just didn't feel right. My blood pressure was continuous uptight. And because I didn't know anything about panic attacks or anxiety, I was flipping out that I was having much more serious problems. So my blood pressure never went down. And I kept looking at it, which made it worse, right? Like, damn. So a week later, I'm like, honey, I do not feel right. Something's wrong. My blood pressure is high. And I was talking to some guys. I started getting tightness in my throat. All high blood pressure, all stress-related, all panic attacks, whatever. But I didn't know it. Went to the hospital, spent 3 days in the hospital. Every test you can run. My entire time in the hospital, my blood pressure was 120/70. I'm just kicking back. I'm reading and no business. What? So they do EKGs, everything. They just threw me out. As soon as I was outside that hospital, my blood pressure soared through the roof. Right. I'm like, what is going on? And so I had to diagnose myself. Which is crazy, right? I had to go figure out what was wrong with me because the cardiologist said, there's nothing wrong with you, go. Well, there was something wrong with me. It was my mental health. And I did not know it. And finally, I just started getting in such a deep, dark hole where I couldn't focus on anything. And I was basically useless. And I've got a growing company. I got investors coming. I got all this other stuff. And, with the foundation. And I'm like, what do I do? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go talk to those ganglion block guys. And I just happened to be in Denver, and my daughter's a nurse practitioner of psychiatric meds. And she said, what's up, Dad? And I was like, honey, I'm just not feeling right. I know you're a shrink doc. Shrink me. Shrink me, man. Tell me what's wrong with me. And she goes, well, I think you've got, I said, I got anxiety diagnosis by the VA. I said, but I've never felt like this. She goes, I think you're having panic attacks. And she mentioned ketamine. She goes, have you ever thought of ketamine? I go, why? What is it? She goes, well, we're getting really good results for anxiety and depression with ketamine. And I was like, and at the same time, I was calling up for about these ganglion blocks. So I had one done last year, and it really helped me with fight or flight mechanisms. Anxiety helped me with PTSD, that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, I need this treatment again. And they immediately asked me if I would like to try ketamine with it. And because my daughter said it, I said, yeah, man, I want to try it. So that's what I was going through. But I didn't know what I was going through. It was, I was in Japan on a trip. The last thing I promised my son was to go to Japan and watch fat guys wrestle.
That's why I wore the shirt.
I love it, dude. Yeah. I was like, yeah, dude. And I got a bunch of stories, and I had a great time. Remember my boy with my amazing brother-in-law and both my nephews are amazing. This is the guy, Baylor was with us. It was great. And so, I was walking around this mall, and all of a sudden, man, bam, I was like, oh, I don't feel good. My blood pressure went through the roof. Had no reason why. I had been working that day, but I didn't associate work with stress, right? So I'm just walking through the mall trying to find my wife a gift, and I lost my mind. I got in such a panic attack. I went back, took my blood pressure, and then I started taking it again, and I said, oh my God, it's going to be over 100. Now I'm going to have to go to crisis mode, and I got to go to the hospital. And I'm in Japan. How am I going to make it home? Loops, yeah. Oh, dude, it was crazy.
Yeah.
So anyways, I had to figure out that I was not in a good place, and I needed to do something about it. And that's when I signed up for the ganglion blocks and the ketamine treatments.
What did panic attacks feel like for you? Because they're different. I mean, for me, there's, dude, like, yeah, feels like for me, it's like your skin is crawling, like there's ants on it, and I would get ringing in my ears, and like, oh, dude, it's gnarly, man.
Yeah, for me, it was, I figured like a panic attack, you'd be just like panicking.
Yeah,
right?
like this or something. Yeah, right.
Breathing. It was like, I just had like this massive adrenaline dump. And then the blood pressure went up, and I felt flush in my face, dizzy in the head, like really compressed in the head, man. And then your worries start kicking in. And I usually don't worry about too much, but here I am in Japan, away from my wife.
Dude, it's that.
If I'm gonna die, I'd like to die home.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast, because that's like one of the things that I felt with panic is like just how quickly your mind goes to doom, and like I'm gonna literally
Doom.
like
Exactly.
I'm literally gonna die. Like it's like, where did that come from? Like how did that get there? for people who haven't gone through panic attacks, I mean, it's just.
And you're thinking, I'm going to die, and you are a healthy 22-year-old kid
Yeah, exactly.
with no reason to die,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
then you start Googling, like, why am I? And then it's like, oh my gosh, like I've got cancer, or
dude, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's for anyone who's going through mental health, it's like when they're listening to this, they're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm going through right now. It's like, dude.
And then it spikes on everything, because it's like, how's it going to affect my wife, my kids? I mean, I'm ready to die. I've been ready to die for a long time. I know I'm going to see my son again. I'd like to get this mission done. I'm always asking God for some more time. I'm like, look, God, if I'm going to die, because I'm in the middle of a panic attack, it's like, all right, God, can I just have like another year? Because I really got to finish. Yeah. I got to get this legislation passed, right? And you start making these deals with the Lord. Just keep me around just a little bit. And that goes back, and we'll talk about some of the resolution I did in my ketamine treatment. But yeah, those panic attacks without knowing what they are. And then once I said, all right, it's a panic attack, I was like, all right, I got medication for that. I got Xanax or whatever I got. Right. I'm just going to calm myself down. And that's when I started working on binaural beats, meditation. I'm like, all right, now I have, see what we talked about before. Once you have a problem that's identified, now I'm going to fix that damn thing, right? I got a panic attack. I got anxiety. Okay. Well, I got some hydroxine, which is like a big Benadryl. Lowers your blood pressure, puts you to sleep, but it calms you down. It's like, I'm going to take some hydroxine. I'm going to go drink a beer. And now I know what I got. And now I'm like, all right, now I'm angry. All right, you ain't going to beat me. Of course, my blood pressure doesn't come down for like 5 hours or some craziness because I'm so amped up. But you can. It's all about identifying the issue, which I didn't identify for a while.
That's the hardest, because, I mean, I think medication helps you take it, absolutely. But the hardest work that you're going to do is the work that you're talking about, right? Understanding what is it that I'm going through, and then how do I do the work to help, actually address the root issue and not just like numb it. Which I think is, that's the hardest work that you can possibly do. So, man, I'm curious, why don't you take us through your ketamine journey, and I'll go into mine after I hear yours. Yours is more interesting than mine.
I don't know about that, dude.
Oh, dude, it is.
It wasn't. I'm like, I feel like I call myself, I'm an astronaut, dude. I'm an astronaut. Well, I didn't know what I was getting into, So I end up in this clinic and go downstairs. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to try this ketamine. Well, nobody prepared me. They didn't tell me you should have music or this or that, so I was kind of behind the times. But the ketamine treatments, I still don't know specifically what they do. All I know is that I have resolved a lot of things through these journeys. And, for those of you who have never taken ketamine, you're literally out of your body. It's scary at first because if you're like me, you don't like to give up control. But I've been practicing holistic stuff with my wife's a yoga instructor, and I believe in a lot of non-traditional medicines that really help people. So this to me was a little bit easier to go with. It took me about 1 or 2 treatments. I fought it a little bit, but. And my first treatment was absolutely elational, man. I was like, saw the beginning of time. I saw my son a lot in that thing. And it was just a lot of euphoric stuff, which was pretty good. Maybe it was the music, I don't know, but it never happened again. So I went back thinking, what's up? And I had some really dark journeys, and I realized that those dark journeys are also necessary to deal with my guilt and to deal with my sense of shame and to deal with the fact that I am just a speck of dust here, and I don't mean anything, and that I was truly ready to die. I mean, I died on 2 of those ketamine trips in my mind. I was like, you know what, Lord, take me. I'm done. I am comfortable now with death. And
not like I want to die, but like not afraid of it.
Not afraid of it. I literally just froze. At one of them I was just like buried, and the other one I was like in some ice, and I just like, you know what? And I just pictured myself dying. Like, I'm dead. I'm enveloped in this blue ice, and I'm not getting out, and I don't care anymore. I just want to go. But as I went along in these journeys, I started making connections that I never made before, and understanding that, in my mind, I was letting for one thing is I definitely confirmed my Christianity and my relationship with the Lord. I truly love my wife. And with my son, that I was absolutely letting him down by crying every day and grieving and snotting and doing all this stuff that it hurts. It hurts to think about him. And I thought that by hurting, I was honoring him because I deserve this grief. I'm part of the reason he's not here. And and I deserve this pain and this discomfort and this just unbelievable just pain that I go through. And in one trip, I said, I started seeing a lot of camouflage, and I'm like, you know what? About the only good thing I've ever done in my life is soldier, and I'm not soldiering for my son. And I need to stop crying and grieving and get on with my mission, which is to create awareness in our parental training, coaching, medical and psychiatric communities that we're harming our children, and we need to stop this. And since then, I cry very rarely, but now by doing the work, I'm honoring my son instead of being in pain. And I realized that my son, your brother, they don't want to see us hurt. They don't want to see us in pain. They made their decisions, and I think by dealing with my son the way I am now, he's happier, and I definitely am. So,
how was your, because you did that and then you did the stellate ganglion block.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing about the ketamine trips is I've never really been on acid before, and it was just the things that go through your head.
I hadn't either until I did the ketamine. I never done psychedelic until I. Yeah, that's nuts.
I tried some acid back in the 80s when I was in the Army. It was nothing like this, boss. I mean, it was just like the colors and everything. And I truly looked forward. I started looking forward as I felt I was gaining some momentum. I look forward to those treatments. I do one a month now. And I just did one a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago. And so I'm going to keep on schedule. I think they do work. But then I went for the stellate ganglion block, and the reason the doc sent me there is they said that your fight or flight mechanism, and you heard Clint talk about his buddy had his fourth one. Your fight or flight mechanism, sometimes just doesn't close, and it's due to stress. It's due to, it could be grief. It could be, just bad memories, could be a bad job, could be a bad marriage, and you just can't, could be financial pressures, and you just can't get off, and you can't close that. And what that does over time is it creates anxiety, depression, and everything that I was dealing with as well. So, I mean, it was a pretty amazing, it's an outpatient procedure. They put you in this hospital bed, you wait. This is the longest part, waiting. You wheeling in there, and they put you on anesthesia. And my gig with anesthesia, I always try to stay awake. Right. I had a hernia operation. All right, I'm going to remember everything here. And then, bam, you're just as soon as they sink that plunger, you're gone.
Right.
And you wake up like 15 minutes later, and then they just inject lidocaine into the ganglion nerve pocket, or the nerve group that lies here in the intersection of the neck and your collarbone, in that pocket there. And between that and the ketamine, it's been night and day, man. I mean, I've never I felt the mental health. Well, I did. I got anger and rage, from my childhood, whatever. But I never thought about mental health in that regard. And honestly, Brant, the way I feel now compared to the way I felt, in February, I mean, I'll never be Pac-Man again, and it's just been too much going on in my life. But it has been night or day. It really has helped. It's helped, and I think you're doing a very, very important job in spreading awareness, of the possibility of this treatment, more or less. So how were your trips, man? I
Yeah,
mean, you're
no,
a fellow astronaut too. Bro.
yeah, I am 100%. Yeah, so I was going through, and by the time that this is recorded, I would have already talked about. I talked to Clint. We had an episode. I talked about what I was going through, not to the whole extent, which will happen later once I'm through it. But the listeners know, like, I was going through my like pretty gnarly depression, anxiety, and I called you, and you could hear my voice, like my voice on the phone.
You were gone, bro.
Dude, we were way different than what I sound right now.
Oh yeah, you were obviously in a lot of pain.
Yeah,
a lot of pain.
A lot of pain, and you were like, dude, I think you should go try these ketamine treatments. And you paid for me to go out to Chicago and try these ketamine treatments. And from the bottom of my heart, you're just that kind of guy. But again, thank you so much for that. For me, you talk about anesthesia. I feel like what it felt like for me is like the feeling right when you get anesthesia and you're trying to fight that. That's what it felt like. Because ketamine is an anesthesia. That's what I felt like throughout the whole thing, like the actual like body feeling, which I thought was interesting. For me, I think especially my first couple ones, I was expecting too much because I heard your stories and I was expecting to like see Matt and like talk. So I think I had those expectations that I had to let go. And I had a panic attack during my first. I had a panic attack during my first ketamine treatment. But I think that's looking back at it, like I think that's an important part. And like doing research on psychedelic treatment, like that anxiety that you face in the beginning, that you're supposed to work through it, because in life you're never not going to have stress and anxiety, but you have to, like we've been talking about, you have to have healthy coping mechanisms to move forward through it, or else you're just going to be debilitated, which is where I was at, right? And also just the gnarly depression, which is, I mean, just you can't even put in words what that.
You were suffering, man.
Yeah,
I
dude.
mean, it was so evident. And
yeah.
I was very worried.
Right.
I was extremely worried, and I prayed a lot for you and about you, hoping that you could come to terms and deal with this and feel better, because I've known you a little while now, or a couple of years, and you're one of the most driven people I've known. You're always optimistic. You're always trying to help folks. You're a very generous human being, and you don't deserve at this age to be dealing with this crap. And I was fervently hoping. I mean, I tossed ketamine out just because I knew it helped me. And I was, hoping that, just that you would just do something instead of, hurt.
Right. Well, and I think so. For me, realizations that I had during ketamine, I also felt every single treatment. I felt a connection to God, and it strengthened my faith as well. That was. Ketamine's hard. It's a really hard experience to try to
Hey man.
Well, it's like it's hard unless you try it. It's truly really hard to put words to the experience. But you're not in control of your own thoughts. It's more like a subconscious thing, and it's like you can steer it in the direction, but like your thoughts, it's not. I'm gonna stop trying to explain it, but
you never know what's gonna come up.
Yeah, but what I will say is, like, I felt just how, like you said, little we are, and how really our mission on this earth is to help other people, right? And just to bring people closer to Christ, and for us to try to be more like Christ. Like, these are the kind of thoughts that I was having during my trip. And also, I was wrestling with this feeling of like how much of the 38 challenge, and I told you this, how much of the 38 challenge has been for myself, and how much has it been for Matt, and how much has it been for other people? Like, has this been a selfish endeavor? Because when you're dealing with depression, your mindset, everything that you think and everything that you see and everything that you experience is through the lens of depression, right? So you don't look at it, you look at it through a sick lens, right? So I was like, you've only done this. It was so self-deprecating. You've only done this for yourself, for your own. And what the ketamine helped me realize is like, listen, you did this to honor your brother. You're doing this to honor your brother. You're doing this to help other people. And then that helped me realize, like, okay, like
And people are telling that you probably everybody you talk to, including me, were telling you, look, man, you've done the right thing. You've just done so much. You would not give yourself a break, bro.
No, and that's what. Looking back at it, like I was taking a piss this morning, and I was thinking, like what, like who was that person that was thinking these thoughts? Like it's so crazy. The different. It gives me chills because it's like that wasn't. It felt like it wasn't me.
It wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
It was not you.
Yeah, and so, but anyways, that was one of the realizations. And others that I need to be kinder on myself, and that this is a lifelong thing. If I choose to embark on this mission, that this is lifelong. Not everything needs to happen in a day. Mm-hmm. But I left that honestly, like thinking like shit that didn't help that much. But then now and then reflecting back on it, and also where I was 2 weeks after, like I don't know what happened. So you talked earlier about what ketamine does to the brain, and for the people listening, I'm not a scientist by any regards, but from the research that I've done, a typical SSRI, right, is allowing more serotonin to be created in your brain, right? So what the ketamine does is it deals with your glutamate and your GABA receptors, which is a completely different mechanism than SSRIs are. So it's impacting a different part of your brain, which is why they're seeing better results in trials, about 70% effectiveness, whereas an SSRI is about 30% effective. Really? Yeah. So wow. The science behind it is crazy. Regardless of your experience, and this is what I had to keep reminding myself, because I didn't necessarily love the ketamine trip, but regardless of the experience, that change in your brain is still happening. You're still, new neural connections are still being made. The neuroplasticity after treatment is like, I don't know what, like I said, I'm not a scientist, but it's significantly increased, meaning the way that your brain is communicating to each other is enhanced. Way different than the typical SSRI, right? So regardless of your experience, your brain is still undergoing change. And my anxiety, my depression from realizing, I think what we talked about, just some like underlying issues and other things that were going on with medications and that kind of stuff. And then me working out like a maniac, doing ice therapy has been super helpful for me. The ketamine, openly talking about my experiences, meditation, healthy diet. Like ketamine is not going to solve the issue, right? But it's a tool to allow you to start to make the decisions that will put you in a better place, which is exactly what it did for you as well.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, it was in zero sum, it was positive.
Yeah,
right. It definitely was a net positive experience, and I resolved quite a few things. I still haven't figured out whether one treatment means, or maybe is good enough, or maybe I should go in for another 6, man. Just knock it out again, right?
Who knows? I think 6 is like you're supposed to get 6 to see the most benefit.
That's the base treatment.
Yeah.
And then they really don't know how often you should do it after that. I mean, the doctor suggested me once a month. Does that mean that the change is, this is all the change that can happen? Can you change more? I don't know. I think it's all based on, I guess too much of anything is not good. It's right. Not good. So, but it's yeah. I mean, and now the next question is, is if you and I can look at it, 2 different people with 2 different backgrounds, yet suffering similar problems.
Well, and 2 different experiences. Like it sounds like yours was your actual experience and journey. You also did more. You took a higher dosage of me. I kind of stayed at the lower baseline, where by the end of it you were kind of taking more.
It didn't really change too much. As a matter of fact, the lower dosages were much more vibrant. Much more colorful, much more. Yeah, I had better results at the lower dose. Like they just doubled that.
Dude, it literally feels like a roller coaster. Like that's a good way to describe it, as it feels like a roller coaster.
Yeah, like your body feels like it's actually moving sideways, backwards, up and down. I mean, It is nuts.
I remember one time, one of the experiences that I had, is also, side note, like, we're not saying go do, like, you should never do ketamine recreationally. You should never do it unless you're at a clinic of someone that you've done a lot of research on, and that who you are comfortable with, and it's an awesome setting, and you have good intention, and you are actually really suffering. Like this isn't something you just go and, oh, I want to go do ketamine.
It's not to escape. It's not an escape drug. I
No,
mean,
no.
It can be.
Yeah, like I was at a point where I was like you said, like I was in a lot of pain, and like I would have done pretty much anything. And so I was like, fuck it, I'll go to Chicago and do.
I definitely get it recommended by a psychiatrist. I mean, any psychiatrist I talk to would.
And I talked to my psychiatrist, and he said, I think this is. He said, I don't see the negative. I don't see the negative. I don't see any. A negative side of you going and doing this.
Here's an interesting point. I'd like your comment, like your thoughts on this. Is like I did one a couple weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. And the woman stayed like in the room, even though I couldn't see her, and I didn't like that. It impacted my experience because in that room, even though we were monitored, right, I felt like I could fully experience this procedure without having another human being in there. So I mean, I know for me personally, I don't think I'd like somebody else in the room. Even somebody I love, because you're dealing with some very personal stuff, like some very gut-wrenching thoughts, you get down to the core, the kernel of who you are. And you have to wrestle with some really dark stuff. We all have a dark side. I mean, and you have to wrestle with that to get to the kernel and find the good and find the positive. And that's not, and if your wife or your husband's there or whatever, it's like,
right.
I personally would not be able to dig as deep as I could if I feel like I'm alone.
I've heard like, for me, I was like, Mom, I don't want you in the room. I want to be by myself. That was my decision. I know there's a lot of like studies where I don't know what, I feel like you'd have to have a pretty low dose of ketamine. Like there's no way I could have had a conversation. I mean, I don't know about you. There's no way I could have. But what they're doing is, I think they're giving low doses of ketamine in like a therapeutic setting, because it lets people's guard down so that they can actually open up and really work through the things that are at the core. So I think in the setting that we took, which was IV and at a relatively higher dose, there's no way I could have had a conversation with someone. There's just
I mean, if it's part of psychotherapy, then the low dose thing might be another way to address it.
Right.
I just know at the dosage we were taking, in order to not enjoy but to let the drug do what it's supposed to do. I personally couldn't have another person in the room, man.
No, I couldn't have either. Yeah. No. But yeah, so that's my, I think it really depends. But
it might work for some folks.
Yeah, but dude, I will say, like I said, a lot of different things, but I'm night and day. Lucas can attest to this. I mean, obviously you can attest.
Oh, I can.
Yeah. Like I'm night and day as well, man. Like, but what I will say is that I'm glad that I went through that experience, because now you and I can have this conversation. I've tried something that I truly believe will help a lot of people and will be the future of mental health, which is psychedelics and different things. And I'm not like, oh, go take mushrooms and like trip balls. Like, that's not, I don't believe in that at all. I've never believed in that. Like, I used to smoke pot a lot. Now it makes me anxious, but the research behind it, now I have this like testimony, and you are a testimony, and so many other people are testimonies to, hey, this stuff like actually does work. But I'm glad I went through that depression and that anxiety, because now I can have more genuine conversation with people who are going through the exact same thing, and I can talk about what it feels like for your skin to be feeling like there's spiders crawling on it, and I can talk about looking in the mirror and not recognizing who's standing in front of you. I can talk about being in bed and literally not being able to get out of it, right? Which, unless you've experienced it, you can't relate, and you can't have empathy for someone going through it right now. And that's what the mission is, man. And so